I've never seen someone like that. He looked like he was carved out of stone. I mean, just the muscles coming out of his chest, and I'm looking at his hands, looking like a gnarled root. And I remember thinking, 12 rounds is a long time to spend with that thing.
Welcome into the ranking show here on ProBox TV. Download the ProBox TV app. Never fall behind in your boxing news. Also, our Wednesday night fights. It's the best way to see it. Download it now. So for the ranking show, we take a survey of everyone behind the scenes here at ProBox TV. We make a top 5 in a particular weight class. Then we debate who is number 1. To help me settle the debate, Jimmy Smith in studio with the man, Chris Algieri, joining us via Zoom. Of course, the champ, Paulie Malignaggi. Today, it's the light heavyweight division, a storied division in boxing. Let's take a look at the champs. Now, I'm not going to give away our number 1 here, but you will see that a lot of the belts held by one particular Eastern European fighter who is absolutely dominant at 175 pounds. Of course, I'm talking about Artur Beterbiev, controlling 3 of the belts. Dmitry, Bivol, the WBA champion. The rest controlled by the man who has 20 wins with 20 knockouts. Doesn't mean he's number 1, so stay tuned. We start out with number 5 on our list, and it is David Morrell, 11-0, 9 knockouts. Problem, of course, with his last performance, his debut at 175 pounds, didn't look outstanding against Kalajic August 3rd. It's supposed to be his breakout performance. Chris, is that why he's on our list, but he's number 5?
You know, I actually had him at number 5 too, which pains me to put someone who's so good and someone I hold so highly at that number 5 position, but it just speaks to the division. It's a very, very deep division with a lot of super talented guys. And also, you look at the record, 11-0, he doesn't have that many fights yet. His last fight against Kalajic, he got a lot of heat for that. I think that's a misrepresentation of him and his skill sets. But number 1, Kalajic's very good. And he fought a very smart fight that night. He came in great shape. He was moving much more than he usually did, fought a much more mature style did Kalajic than we saw him when he fought Beterbiev, where he kind of just went at him and tried to fight fire with fire. He boxed well. He used his size and his speed and his boxing ability. And listen, it was Morrell's first fight at 175. Guys, 168 to 175 is a big jump. I know you people at home, it's only 7 pounds. Well, it's one of the bigger jumps that you can make in our sport. And we've seen guys really struggle with that 68 to 75. We saw it with Benavidez when he took on Vazdik. In his first fight at 75, people expected him to stop Vazdik because Beterbiev did. He didn't. He was actually had a very, very good fight. Good performance, actually. So you got to blame a little bit of the weight for that last fight. So I don't think you should really beat him over the head in terms of that performance. But in terms of where he stands in this division, this feels about right for me. Again, just because there's so many top guys in this weight class. But David Morrell is real trouble. And with a couple more fights under his belt at 75, could move up that ranking very quickly.
Now, he's 26, right in his physical prime, Paulie. Is he the guy we're talking about maybe in a couple years? Number 5 right now, but he has the most potential upswing at 175. What do you think?
It's possible. You know, I do think that he's one of the better fighters in the sport. At 168, I thought he was, probably a contender for a major world championship right now. At 175, being he has the one performance at light heavyweight, it wasn't very convincing. Again, I'll reiterate what the champ Chris said. Kalajic is no one easy to deal with. He's very good himself. But it wasn't a very convincing performance for the 175-pound division. Remember, the champion made another good point. This is a tough jump to make. 168 to 175 is a lot of times has not gone well for a lot of fighters who tried it. So I think it's a tough jump where he hasn't convinced me yet that he's a top light heavyweight, but he can definitely build into it. He's got all the skill set, the experience in the boxing world in general, between the amateurs and the pros, a great team around him. And of course, at 26 years old, like you said, Jimmy, I mean, he can grow into the weight class very, very well. So there's potential there, but he hasn't been convincing in one fight. I mean, it's tough for me to just rate him so high in one fight, but yeah, I mean, I don't have a problem with it. I think with some time to build into the weight class, he'll eventually probably find his place where he belongs among the elite of it.
Well, when you go from number 5 to number 4, you can see the direction here. Joshua Buatsi coming in at number 4. Why? More fights, a little bit older at 31, 18-0, also undefeated. So you see from Morrell, there's a little more seasoning in Buatsi. Do you like him at number 4?
No, I got Buatsi here because he's damn good. 175. He's a guy that often gets misplaced in this weight class. People forget to mention him, but he's an excellent, excellent fighter. He's a guy who's been chomping at the bit for a number of years now. Just really hasn't gotten his shot. He's one of those guys. He could easily take over this division in a couple of years, depending on what happens at the top. I think he's got a great amateur background. He's got the physicality for the weight class. He's got the mindset, and I think he's really ready to make that big springboard into the big fights. He had that. We're looking at him right now, cracking Aziz. That was a really good fight. Great breakout performance for him against another top guy that was around over on the UK side. But I think his future is very bright. He just needs to get in the ring with all these guys. I would love to see him with a guy that didn't actually make our list, but is right there, is Anthony Yard. Right. Another British fighter. Super, super fun. He's a good litmus test for these guys because he's fought Beterbiev and Kovalev, and those are both exciting fights. So I want to see Buatsi with all of these guys, but I think it makes a lot of sense if we put him with Yard. I like that fight, and I think that would really help him move up along the rankings. But this is a tough weight class, man. Yeah. The guy this good is sitting here at number 4. It just speaks to how tough this weight class really is right now.
Is there a little problem, Chris? I want to ask you about this while we're on the topic. Fighters, let's say Japan, let's say UK. You put butts in seats in the UK. There's no real financial motivation to come here. Like you said, he isn't fighting the top guys in America. Well, he's putting butts in seats over in the UK. Is there a lot of financial motivation to get him what we call out of the pond? Is that true?
Hey, it could be, but I've actually spoken to Josh himself, and he wants all the smoke. He wants the big fights. He wants to come over here. He wants to make. He doesn't care where the fights are. He wants the fights. He wants just the guys in the ring across from him. He's got the mindset of a fighter. That's why I mentioned that. So I really like where his head's at and what he's thinking about where he is in his career at this point.
When you look at him, once again, more experienced, but 31 years old. Our number 5 was 26 years old. What do you think of his future and where he can go for the next couple of years in his career, Buatsi?
Yeah, I'm actually disappointed in the way they've moved Buatsi. I rated Buatsi very, very highly. Not only an Olympian, but he was a bronze medalist at the Olympics in 2016. I thought he was going to move pretty fast. He was super, super impressive early on in his pro career. Not that he's not impressive now, but I thought a guy like this was really ascending fast. The problem was that the light heavyweight division was really stacked. I mean, Beterbiev has been there for a while, and he's been knocking guys out. He was actually more in his prime at the time when Buatsi was coming up. So it was kind of tough to just move Buatsi, such a great prospect, so much potential, right into a guy who's a monster like this, which is Beterbiev. It's a little bit difficult to just blame everybody here, but this is a sport. You've got to eventually get the shot. He's 31 years old, so he's still kind of at a prime age. I would have liked to see Buatsi get a shot earlier. I'm not going to say he regressed, but I feel like a lot of the excitement and the luster has rubbed off on him. I do believe he belongs in the top 5. He was in my top 5 as well, but I feel like it's almost a shame because I think in a different era where the light heavyweight division isn't so stacked, he's a definite world champion. Because the light heavyweight division is so difficult and so deep right now, maybe he doesn't become world champion. But at least the elite of the division, especially Beterbiev namely, is old enough to where maybe he's phasing out. And in Buatsi, though he's not on a prime age, he's still at an age enough where he can maybe grab a world championship. We'll see. We got to see how the weight class shifts around. But I've been disappointed with the way they've moved Buatsi. I really expected more, and I would have expected more opportunities taken from him. Even if he would have jumped into it and maybe took a loss against some of these guys, we could have still seen some potential fireworks, because the kid, I don't think would be in a fight where even if the guy is better than him or the guy beats him, he would be ruined. I think Buatsi would fight fire with fire against anybody, and whether he wins or loses would be in a good fight. So I think even if they would have matched him with the championship fighter earlier, he wouldn't have been ready for him. Maybe he would have got beat, but I think he would have proved his mettle, and there would be more demand for him even across the pond, because he would have taken a chance like that. Instead, right now, you talk about the motivation across the pond, Jimmy. He's not really known across the pond. I know me and Chris know him because we've been over to the UK, and he's got a little bit of notoriety if you're a hardcore boxing fan. But based on how good this kid was, he should be more known in the sport of boxing, even across the pond. But right now, I feel like they keep him stuck across the pond over in England because they haven't gotten him the notoriety anywhere else in the larger sphere of things, even though he's world class.
When you move on, of course, to number 3, when you say this division is stacked, this is where I had him. It's probably where most people had him. Benavidez, 29-0, 27 years old, and he's 3rd on our list. Champ, you talked about the Vostok fight, how he won but didn't look great, didn't have the coming out party, much like Morrell that we expected him to have. Is it the idea that if you're going to move up in weight class, you're going to have this big opening, shouldn't be a veteran guy with a tricky style? Was that the problem for both Morrell and Benavidez? Was that the issue?
It's funny, Jimmy, you said he didn't look great. He looked damn good. But no one cares about good. Yeah. Right. People, especially when you're under the microscope the way that David Benavidez is, they expect great. And, Vostok, I mean, he showed up. The guy was in fantastic shape. He looked incredible. Looked the best he's ever looked, and he's 37 years old. But he went out there. He also has a very tricky style. He's a good boxer. He's long. He's strong, and he showed incredible conditioning that night. So, you know, he put up a really stiff test for David Benavidez. But I thought David Benavidez looked great. I mean, his first fight at 175, we spoke earlier about how difficult that transition is to move up a weight class, especially that one. I believe he had a hand injury as well that developed during the fight, or maybe even developed during camp. So he had to deal with that. But all taken in, I thought it was a good performance from Beterbiev. It was a good entry into the 175-pound division. He didn't fight a snowflake. He fought a tough guy. And he's one of those guys, man, he's knocking on the door of one or two. He wants those guys that are above them, which anyone who knows boxing knows who the number one and number two guys are right now. Not necessarily which one's which, but you know who we're talking about. But Benavidez is one of those guys, man. He's the Mexican monster, and he wants to fight everyone around him that people think that is better than him.
Now, Paulie, before we get into, obviously, your thoughts on Benavidez, what's your thought on that move up in weight class where both guys, Morrell and Benavidez, didn't look spectacular, I guess, in their debut at light heavyweight, but your body takes a minute to adjust to that new weight class. You moved up in weight class. That first fight, is it a little bit of a shock to the system?
It could be. You know, a lot of times your first weight fight, when you move up in weight, you'll actually test it out against a guy who was also formerly in your former weight. Yeah. You know, like that's typically what happens. But Benavidez is just so good. They matched him with a former light heavyweight world champion right off the jump. And so, yeah, okay, he didn't look super stellar. But let's analyze it a little bit between the lines here. Gvozdyk is a former world champion who's got one loss, and that's to Artur Beterbiev, who is one of the boogeymen of boxing, right? And he's still in this weight class. Obviously, we're going to talk about him later on in this list. Unified world champion now is Beterbiev, and really gave Gvozdyk the only loss going into the Benavidez fight, and Gvozdyk didn't make Beterbiev look so good either. You know, I mean, eventually Beterbiev was able to get him out of there, but Gvozdyk was winning that fight. Yeah, Gvozdyk was up on 2 cards. He was boxing well, just kind of got suffocated out with the pressure and power. So it's not looking great against Gvozdyk isn't an unforgiving thing, but you know. Gvozdyk now has 2 losses, and the other one is to Benavidez, who also beat him not looking great. So people are going to go on with the criticism and so on and so forth. So when you analyze between the lines, he only fight at light heavyweight against a guy who's a former world champion, and in his 2 losses made guys who were very good not look so good, you know? Now, having said that, here's the devil's advocate as well. Champ, you mentioned, again, the tough jump from 168 to 175. Well, again, you show it here. You know, Benavidez going up to 168 to 175. Even if he's got no belt at 168, he's the number 1 guy at 168. It was bar none. There's no shot. I've said it a million times. No shot Canelo to beat him. So you know, you got your number 1 guy at 168. You're going up to 175, and look, it's tough. I mean, that fight shows it right there. He didn't look super great. But again, I just explained to you the reasoning, a lot of the reasoning you can put into consideration about why he didn't look great at 175. You know, honestly, I wouldn't mind seeing a Gvozdyk Buatsi fight myself. You talk about Buatsi and Yard. I wouldn't mind Gvozdyk getting in there with any of these guys either. You know, he's still, even though he's coming off the layoff, he's shown that he's still viable up there with his skill level as well. Again, I mean, you talk about Bivol and Beterbiev, that you know they're the boogeymen of the division and 2 of the biggest boogeymen in boxing. Benavidez has to move in there as well, and he's trying to move in there as well. Hard to get a gauge to see what kind of a chance he's going to have based off the performance against Gvozdyk. But just beating Gvozdyk is a solid statement because again, I just gave you all the reasons why Gvozdyk is a solid win, just getting the W.
Well, you talked about it, Chris. There's no doubt about who the top 2 are. Dmitry Bivol, Artur Beterbiev. They are fighting in October. Come on, fingers crossed, let this happen. So, when I put Dmitry Bivol at number 2, I thought I would be in the minority. I really thought Bivol would be number 1 on our list. He is number 2 on the list. Is that a fair place to put him with his boxing? Chris, a lot of people, you've talked about how, especially with the knee injury, you're kind of thinking he gets over the top on Beterbiev. Is he right at number 2 or is it a coin flip?
We're splitting hairs at this point. The reason we want this fight so bad is because it is so contested. It's so interesting to see who's going to be able to enact their style and get the victory here. They're both so good. They're both so dominant, and in very different ways too. So the style matchup is really interesting. Boxing diehards are like, man, I can't wait to see what this is going to look like. And then for everyone else, they're like, well, we got Beterbiev, his 100% knockout percentage. We got Bivol, who's the other champion in the weight class. We're getting unification. We're in the era of unification. So this fight, man, it just checks all the boxes. It really, really does. And in terms of where they fall in the ranking system, again, it's hairs. It's going to be super, super close. And we may not get an answer after one fight. We may need 2 or 3 of these guys to fight each other to really figure out who is the best guy around. I actually had Bivol as number 1. I've been shifting my thought processes on who's who between these two. I'm back to Bivol. I was Beterbiev for a while there. I was Bivol before that. Back to Bivol now. But again, when you're talking about 1 and 2, I mean, it's razor thin.
Malik Zanad was the last time we saw Bivol fight. He was pushed. Zanad came to fight. That was a fight where he was pushed, and guess what? Bivol knocked him out. Yeah. How much do you think that sentiment, that expression of, yes, I'm a great boxer on the outside, I throw a good combination, push comes to shove, I can hit too. Do you think that was important?
It was important because he was labeled as a guy who doesn't knock anybody out. He was labeled as a guy who's going to take a safety first. He's labeled as a guy who's going to be more of a defensive fighter, and he's going to be in and out. He's going to make you miss. He's going to make you pay for it at times, but he's not really going to follow up to get you out of there. That fight, he moved forward the entire time. He fought almost with a high guard, came forward. He showed a different facet to his game. I think that was really important. I think it's going to make people think a little bit about what's going to happen next in this fight.
Yeah, from Kyrgyzstan, you see right there, Paulie, you often say Eastern European fighters, man, they're just built different. We have 2 of them at number 1 and number 2. What do you think of Bivol at number 2? Where was he on your list?
Yeah, and that's the thing. I mean, it's like splitting hairs, like first season. Jam, you made a great point there. I mean, there's so many arguments to put either of these guys at the top. I also had Bivol at number 2, and I'll tell you why I had Bivol at number 2, Jimmy, like you did. It's at a certain point when you're just splitting hairs and you can't really figure out which way to go, and you got arguments on both sides. I think the belts do come into place, and Beterbiev having unified 3 of the 4 titles. He's got 3 of the 4 title belts. You got to give him that respect. At a certain point, I do rate the belts, having unified a lot of them, as something else. When Devin Haney was the undisputed lightweight champion, I thought that Shakur Stevenson would have beat him. I thought that Lomachenko did beat him, but I still put him at number 1 because, you know, he was the undisputed lightweight champion. Canelo Alvarez, at 168, I feel that Morrell and Benavidez would beat him and rather easily, I think. But again, I give him the respect of having the undisputed title, and he's number 1 guy at 168. So in this regard, I'm not saying I definitely feel Bivol beats Beterbiev. It's difficult going back and forth, really, because you can make arguments for both. But when you can't really make up your mind, at least in my book, you know, I start to rate the belts and the importance of those a little bit more. And Beterbiev having had 3 of the 4 world championships in the undisputed picture pushes him to number 1, Beterbiev over Bivol. But the fight is going to give us some answers, and hopefully we get this fight, and hopefully there's no more pullouts soon.
Gentlemen, we're all professionals in the combat sports world, right? I've done color, I've done play-by-play. We all fought in different combat sports, you guys in boxing, me in MMA. Rarely does it get beyond business for us, right? The reason I put Beterbiev at number 1, I called some of his early fights in PBC. Rarely, guys, and I want to know if you agree with me, do you see somebody go, Jesus? You get that physical reaction. He would knock guys out. I was ringside. I was calling it for PBC, and I went, yeah, that's a scary guy. And it was almost that Ivan Drago, that Rocky IV kind of feeling of break you. He didn't smile. He didn't celebrate. He walked to his corner and kind of put his hand up. That visceral idea of this guy isn't a professional. He makes people fear him. That's why he's my number 1. Chris, what do you think of that, man?
I got 2 stories for that as a rebuttal to that. All right, please. One of them is right along where you are. One of them is going to give a little pushback. Right. I had the same feeling when I saw Bivol fight the first time. I was in the opposite corner. I was with Sullivan Barrera when he fought Bivol for the WBA title, and I remember right away. It was in the first 45 seconds of the first round. His ability to change distance and make a man miss by a hair and then crack them. I was like, it's going to be a long night. I knew right there the fight was lost. Sullivan stepped in with a jab, missed by 6 inches. Bivol stepped in, hit him with a solid, hard jab. And I was like, oof, that distance control, that's a really difficult thing to deal with. I don't care how hard you punch. You can't hit it, doesn't matter. But then I called the Gvozdyk-Beterbiev fight. A big fan of Gvozdyk. Always have been, always was, up until that point. He comes in first. We do the fighter meeting. I'm like, man, you know, answers everything, super smart, really well-spoken. I love his style, his body type, everything. And then Beterbiev came in the room. And it was, I've never seen someone like that. He looked like he was carved out of stone. I mean, just the muscles coming out of his chest. And I'm looking at his hands, looking like a gnarled root. And I remember thinking, 12 rounds is a long time to spend with that thing. And sure enough, that changed my mind about who was going to win that fight. And Gvozdyk fought great, but 12 rounds. Champ, you said suffocating pressure and power, right? Oof, that's a great way to put it. He is suffocating. He is dangerous. He is deadly. He's carved out of wood or stone, and he's going to come and he's going to hurt you. And that's the vibe that I got from him when he walked into that room. Scary, scary guy. They're both scary in different ways, but Beterbiev is more like in your nightmares. Bivol's more like, man, you forgot your homework. That nightmare. Different kind of homework.
You're in high school naked?
Yeah,
it's embarrassing to look like that,
Different kind of nightmare, but yeah.
All right, so 20-0, 20 knockouts. Is it that it factor, Paulie, of he can end a fight at any time with one shot? Is that what puts him over the top?
Yeah, and like you guys, I also worked some Beterbiev fights earlier in his career, and it was just scary. I mean, it looked like he wasn't even trying. He wasn't even loading up. He would just hit you on the chin, and you were gone. I mean, just gone. I mean, I can remember the Campillo knockout when I worked that fight. Campillo was just dangling on the ropes. He just looked like he just totally unconscious, standing up out of nowhere. You know, just in a shot that didn't really look like anything. You know, and it's just crazy. And you saw him doing this again and again and again. So it became to the point where you were like, dude, this guy's just got rocks in his hands. You know, it was a different level. As a matter of fact, the only thing here that's making this fight so difficult for me to decide on is Beterbiev's age. If Beterbiev was at a more prime age, and I rate Bivol. This is just how difficult his weight class is. If Beterbiev was at a more prime age, I would be confident in Beterbiev winning this fight. I'm not, because, you know, Bivol is actually obviously good, very good. And of course, Beterbiev's age and some of the breaking down you start to see makes me wonder. But I mean, you got a guy. I mean, are they? Isn't he from the same place as Khabib is in the UFC, right? I mean,
Dagestan.
Yeah, that
Khabib is
culture
Dagestani.
over there.
Yeah.
They just breed fighters. They be different kind of human beings because they have this laser hyper focus, and it's just, not only is it like a job for them, it's like there's a pride there as well. There's a principality there to how they do it. And they're just destroyers. And really, anybody in boxing, everybody was scared of this guy. I mean, Beterbiev hasn't been able to really cross over into superstardom because he hasn't had that super personality. Nobody wants to go near him. You know what I mean? In the UFC, you're able to force guys to make fights eventually.
Right.
But so you know, but still, Khabib's personality wasn't hyper and super charismatic, so he didn't get to become as big of a star. And you know, you had the example with McGregor that he was, you know, he's a super charismatic guy and super popular guy. And you know, I mean, listen, MMA fans, they're I'm not gonna outright call them dumb. They are, but we don't want to always abuse the fan base. But they're the only ones that you can do cartwheels and flip around, light yourself on fire, and maybe they'll start believing you can win the fight over this guy. In boxing, you can light yourself on fire all you want. You can do cartwheels. Nobody thinks you're going to be Beterbiev. You know, Beterbiev in his prime was so scary. Nobody wanted to see him. Nobody wanted to go near him. Nobody wanted to pick against him. Nobody wanted to do anything. So it's that level. He's like the Khabib of boxing. Only he hasn't been able to get those huge fights. This is a monster fight here. The light heavyweight division has kind of continued to ascend along with Beterbiev. And is he in his prime enough? That's the only question. Is he still in his prime enough at 39 to be able to handle a guy who is very, very special? You still can only deal with a special fighter if you're going to consider beating Beterbiev even at 39 years old. And Bivol is a very special fighter. So this is what makes all of this very, very exciting.
J-Rod from the better side right now is in his time machine going back to 1978 to get a jacket. But when he does his show, Chris, are you betting on Father Time if you're betting against Beterbiev? Is that essentially where your head is for this fight?
So I was saying earlier, I've been flip-flopping, and I tend to flip-flop when it comes to fights that are this close, but I was always Bivol. And then Beterbiev looked so damn good against Callum Smith, who's a very, very tough guy, and he had nothing for him, and he showed his boxing skills. It was incredible. But then the injuries happened. The jaw, the knee. Then I start thinking, Father Time is undefeated, even against a beast like Beterbiev. And that made me think. Knee surgeries. I've had a knee surgery. I know the way it affects a fighter's balance, their conditioning, their ability to train, their ability to move in the ring, so many different things. And they always say legs are the first thing to go as you age. So if you are betting for Bivol at this stage, you have to take into account the age. 40 years of age, injury after injury after injury, and the fact that he trains very, very hard. Getting through a training camp as you're older is really the fight before the fight. Getting through the camp really matters when you get older because it's very, very difficult, very taxing on your body. So yes, if you are thinking about picking Bivol, you got to take age into account.
Yeah, that's it. But it's going to be a monster fight. That's right. It's going to be October 12th. Beterbiev versus Bivol to settle our number one. But that was our top 5. Get the app. That's right. ProBox TV app allows you to chat, give your opinions about our top 5. Remember, Canelo Berlanga coming up September 14th. Check it out. We'll see you next time.
He's the pride of Guadalajara, the Mexican maestro, the unified super middleweight champion of the world, Canelo Alvarez. His challenger, undefeated knockout artist and pride of Puerto Rico, Edgar Berlanga. It's prime time.
Canelo versus Berlanga, plus Lara versus Garcia. Saturday, September 14th, live on PBC pay-per-view on Prime Video.
For more ProBox TV, scan the QR code on the screen or go to the App Store and Google Play. ProBox TV, your boxing channel.